is another day in the Trump administration 2.0. In the latest news, they are considering $5,000 baby bonus checks for new moms. There's been a concern over America's declining birth rate for years now. In 2023, the birth rate in America dropped to 1.62 births per woman, and we're well below the replacement rate as a nation. If we look closer, birth rates fell among adult women younger than 40, though they were unchanged for women in their 40s. Obviously, a declining birth rate is a national problem because civilizational survival depends on it. The classic example is Japan, which is dealing with new challenges to its workforce, tax base, and healthcare and pension costs as it grapples with a graying population. If America isn't vigilant now, aka sufficiently repopulating, we'll have the same issue in a few decades. But we're at a fork in the road on this topic. There are radical pronatalists like Elon Musk who think any means or method to achieve more human beings on Earth is a positive one. For the record, he has 14 known children with 4 women.
But I still run into a lot of people who think Earth is overpopulated. So I'm like kind of hammering this point. We're not overpopulated, we're underpopulated. We need to have babies by whatever means, whether it's IVF, surrogacy, whatever the case may be. That can certainly help. But we just can't go extinct.
So what about this baby bonus being floated? Several lawmakers are exploring legislation to offer new parents a baby bonus, a one-time payment of a few $1,000s to the mother of the child to be issued soon after her delivery. The baby bonus could also take the form of a young child or newborn supplement to the existing child tax credit. We will support baby booms, and we will support baby bonuses for a new baby boom, Trump has said. But there's more nuance to this debate, and such sweeping approaches could have unintended consequences. I'm excited to be joined by Emma Waters, a policy analyst at the Heritage Foundation, who was featured in the New York Times this week. Thanks so much for joining us, Emma.
Of course, thanks for having me.
So, what distinguishes you as a non-pronatalist in this debate?
So, the main distinction that I would posit is that whereas pronatalists are primarily concerned with more babies, typically by any means necessary, I would call myself in the pro family camp, which means that not only are we concerned about declining birth rates in the United States and around the world, but our primary goal is not simply more babies, but more families formed so that they can be raised in environments where they're most likely to flourish.
So, MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, that's obviously RFK Jr.'s brainchild, part of this very important coalition that got Trump elected. They would argue, I think, that fertility is a serious crisis in this country. Now, would you say that you would prefer that there be maybe less incentives for baby making by the government and more so a focus on the fertility struggles among young women and young men?
Yes. So I think this is what the Maha movement has done so well is they've shifted our attention away from the gimmicky headlines to focusing on root cause treatments for a number of diseases and illnesses. And I think this is where infertility is most misunderstood in these debates. So typically when you hear infertility, you hear that infertility is a disease that's diagnosed after 6 to 12 months of failing to conceive, right, through unprotected intercourse. But in reality, infertility is not actually a disease, but it's a symptom of underlying reproductive health conditions. And so for women, these reproductive health conditions can look like things like endometriosis, PCOS, hormonal imbalances. And for men, it can be things like low sperm count, low sperm motility, erectile dysfunction, or other lifestyle factors. And what's so notable is that we've seen a marked increase in these reproductive health conditions in men and women that has corresponded to the increase in couples who are struggling with infertility. So while there are many different studies, on average, people say that there are about 16% of all couples in the United States who are struggling with infertility. And so
Wow.
what this points to is a massive health crisis where men and women are simply like their bodies are not healthy enough to be able to reproduce and have the children that they desire. So our goal, and I think it very much aligns with the MAHA movement, is to provide better resources and education and root cause treatments to really get at the heart of that cause of infertility rather than just addressing it through other means that circumvent the infertility but don't actually improve the health of the men and women involved.
Absolutely. And I think also at the heart of natalism is this idea that there's a cultural hesitance to have more children. Even if we solve the underlying causes and the health issues that are driving infertility, we still have a reluctance among, I think, a lot of Gen Z and millennials, or they're just postponing marriage and child rearing more and more. So, how does how does Trump in this moment try to solve that problem?
Yes, it's a fantastic question. And with this issue in particular, there is no silver bullet solution. This is going to take partnerships all across the US government and our private sector as well, addressing the cultural factors as well as the economic factors that are driving this overall decline in birth rates. So, on the cultural side of things, I think it's really important to point out two things. First, when you see couples and individuals who reference their desire to forego or delay childbearing, typically the number one reason that they share has to do with their overall lifestyle or personal goals. So we have this mismatch where we view marriage and children as the capstone to our life, something that we do once we've achieved all of our career goals. When in reality, the best way or the better way to look at this, I think, is to view children and marriage as the cornerstone of our life. It should be the foundation upon which we build all aspects of our career, and what we hope to achieve. And I think in some ways, there's been a major swap here that has done a lot of women and men in injustice when it comes to how they think about children. Secondly, going back to this rise in reproductive health conditions, there are a number of women who are seeking permanent sterilization through hysterectomies or feel like they have to rely on a long-term use of birth control to manage these really painful reproductive health conditions. And this is
Mhm.
I've heard from women on the left and the right, or who just straight up apolitical. And in many cases, they've pointed to these painful experiences saying, if this is what my normal monthly cycle is like, how in the world can I ever consider getting pregnant and going through pregnancy and labor and postpartum care for my child? And I think that's a really daunting thing that's been underexplored in our national discourse on this issue. And then, certainly on the economic side, I think that there's a lot more that the federal government can and should do to support families. And again, there's no silver bullet solution, but I think anything that we can do to help lessen the tax burden or provide financial incentives for families is a blessing that can go a long way in taking away some of the stress when it comes to thinking about having more children.
That is so insightful. And you mentioned how the birth control pill and hormonal contraception are treated like this band aid for a lot of young women that are struggling with endo or any of those other reproductive, kind of bodily issues. And that's before you get to the fact that at the doctor's office, these practitioners are prescribing birth control to young girls, I mean, as young as like the age of 13, like it's candy. And then they kind of get entrenched into our lifestyles, and before you know it, you've been on it 10 years, and the medical community says, oh, you can just hop right off and you'll be able to conceive it, no problem. And I think that to an extent is was kind of incorrect guidance that not necessarily was true. And I hear you on the socioeconomic conditions. I wonder if that's also a fallacy, though, because I think a lot of people feel like they don't have the financial stability to raise a family. But then you hear from other people's testimonies say, "Hey, it's actually not that expensive to raise a child. You just think that you have to shower them with extra things and materials that they don't actually need. It's just that like the societal kind of expectations of like what the good life looks like is now so much more filled with kind of extra things." But I just wanted to ask you, Emma, on top of that, so you've obviously seen the buzzy headlines, all the scandal and drama surrounding Elon Musk and his baby mamas, what seems to be a modern harem of sorts. How is his strategy of repopulation suboptimal for society, if that is in fact what you think?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. So, without a doubt, Elon Musk has done more than most people to raise the issue of declining birth rates to a national and civilizational topic. And so, I think credit is due to him when it comes to raising awareness for this issue. However, his approach to addressing declining birth rates, I think, misses that fundamental distinction that I made at the beginning of this interview, which is that ultimately we don't just want more babies born, we want more families formed. And so what we see in the wake of Elon Musk are multiple women, former wives, or simply girlfriends or surrogates, who have all played a role in helping him have children. But the reality is that once you have multiple children, especially by different women, the amount of time that you as a dad actually get to spend with those children is incredibly limited. And while I have no doubt that Elon Musk is a fantastic and loving father, the reality is there's just physical constraints to how much time you can spend with your children, especially when they're living in different places. And so I think
Hmm.
the question here is, do we want to see a nation of children who are raised apart from their mother and father, who are constantly having to vie for their attention or travel long distances or simply go days without seeing them? And when we look at family structure studies across the board, we see that without a doubt, children who are raised by their married biological mother and father do the absolute best when it comes to their emotional, physical, psychological health, their educational outcomes, and even their ultimate financial success. And so while Elon Musk, given the amount of resources that he has, may be an exception in some of these areas, I think by and large, the average person who's looking for a figure to mirror when it comes to their family formation ways are going to do best if they raise children in a married family rather than trying to mimic the lifestyle of a billionaire that's simply not attainable for most people.
So spot on. Children are always and everywhere a blessing, but they need the anchor of a family, or else they will likely develop identity crises. And that is a huge disservice to those children as they grow up. Emma Waters, policy analyst at the Heritage Foundation, this has been so fabulous and enlightening. Thank you so much for your time. And you guys can follow her on social media as well as at Heritage, where she continues to contribute to amazing policy papers on IVF, on fertility, and natalism in general. As Emma said, more children for its own sake should not be the goal. What is important are families with a mother and a father raising their children. Marriage, which is declining as an institution, creates a home environment of stability and structure that is essential for a child's development. This is why divorce is so disruptive. The Trump administration is focusing on the supply side of this birth rate debate. A big part of that push is IVF, in vitro fertilization.
Oh, I want to talk about IVF. I'm the father.
You don't
I'm the
hear that
father
every day.
I'm the father of IVF, so I want to hear this question.
President Trump has been unapologetically pro IVF. He signed an executive order to make it ultra accessible early in his term.
I've been saying that we're going to do what we have to do, and I think the women and families, husbands, are very appreciative of it.
Emma Waters, who we just talked to, told the New York Times if the executive order's goal is to increase access to infertility care and keep costs down, the solution is not to push IVF for everyone. For those unfamiliar, IVF is when eggs are harvested from the woman's uterus, fertilized outside the womb, then reinserted in the hopes of implantation and then pregnancy. It's become extremely popular as the fertility rate has worsened. 70% of American adults say IVF access is a good thing. But critics say it leads to the dangerous commoditization of children. It's opposed by the Catholic Church and other faith institutions. Ashley McGuire wrote for National Review, for every baby produced through IVF, there are typically many more that are destroyed, discarded, or turned into lab material for scientists. Others are condemned to the cold limbo of the freezer, where somewhere between 600,000 and 1 million embryos today await their fate. In the past, Republican politicians have just wanted to leave IVF alone so as not to alienate female constituents. But in early 2024, Republicans championed IVF. The Senate GOP campaign arm sent a memo to candidates for office advising them to, quote, clearly state their support for IVF and to publicly oppose any efforts to restrict access to the treatment. Then Senator Marco Rubio, now Trump's Secretary of State, was the only one to publicly acknowledge that it's a sensitive and emotional balancing act. The ethical dilemma that IVF poses is, in order to create life, you'll have to destroy life because you'll create embryos that are not going to be used, Rubio said. So as advisors to President Trump helped to shape this administration's policy on the American family, it's important to distinguish holistic fertility education from government incentives, like a child tax credit, from radical pronatalism, which calls for reproduction by any means necessary. If you enjoyed this, make sure to like the video, leave your thoughts in the comment section below, and ring the notification bell to make sure you never miss a video. But if you missed our latest one, it's about how Katy Perry and other celebrities went to space, and the feminists are so mad about it. For more on that, click here.